coming at you today to give you a fun little tutorial. Today's is more of like a product slash supply review and or exploration. So what you're going to end up seeing is a few different products that you might have heard of and might have questions about. So a lot of times when you're doing mixed media, you'll see people using water-soluble crayons. You've probably also seen the word gelatos or pastels that are water-soluble. Those would be the not oil pastels, but they're actually wax pastels. So I'm going to go over a few of those that I happen to have on hand. And there are some more that fall in line with certain ones that I have, so I can tell you about those as well. But just to give you an idea of what we're going to be looking at, and then I'll kind of play around with it, and then at the end I'll check back in and tell you kind of what I did with each one. But first, let me tell you what we're going to be using. The first one is water-soluble wax pastels. So these look a lot like oil pastels if you've ever seen them. However, they are water-soluble, meaning if I get a paintbrush wet, and the color will then move, right? So that's one of the differences between oil and water soluble. So this one is Artist Loft, and this just happens to be a set I have. And I did pull some colors. I pulled some uniform colors just to test out different things, and have like a uniform controlled experiment, if you will. The next one is Faber-Castell's Gelatos. You may have heard these before. They come in like a little lipstick-like tube. And these also are water-soluble, so will move with water. So I'll show you what they look like without it, and then with it, and then we'll do some blending too. And then the last one that I have to show you today is Marabu art crayons. So these are kind of my new favorite right now. Just, you know, got them brand new recently, so playing around with new supplies has always kind of become your favorite. But these are as well, again, water soluble. They'll move around. One of the biggest differences is that these ones, the Marabu art crayons, as well as some other art crayons that are out there, and I can list some different brands and things. Once you heat set them, they are permanent. So you can draw with them, then use your paintbrush and move the color almost like a watercolor, and then heat set, and then they'll be permanent. So then if you come back over it with something that's wet, it won't move the color again. It will now be set. The other thing is that they will be set permanent after 24 hours. So if you don't heat set, but you just let it sit overnight, and then you come back to a project the next day, these will actually stay still. And then I'm going to test these out a little bit too. I will say, technically, I don't think either of these heat set. However, you'll start to see that once I apply heat, they act a little differently. So maybe they don't bleed as much. You know, they're not running all over the place. However, just kind of keep that in mind if you're doing a project where you know you're going to be doing a lot of layers, which is why these kind of are really nice for mixed media if you're going to be doing layer on layer. You don't have to worry about them running. And then we'll chat a little bit more about these two and what they look like after being heat set when I come back. So what I'm going to do is sort of play around. I have similar colors of each one. I have a blue of each. I have a light purple of each. I have a pink of each one. A red-ish. This one's a little more of like a pinky red. And then an orange of each one. So that way we'll be comparing apples to apples a little bit. Again, these tones are not all perfectly the same. This Gelatos, all of these come from the Brights collection that they have. So they do have more standard colors. They have Brights. They also, I think, have shimmery ones. A couple other things. So they have a lot of different sets. These guys come in sets of 4 or individually. So I got mine. You get kind of like the blue came together, you know, like with that, and then you get like your purple, blue, and pink, and then you get these guys, oops, sorry, pink, and then these guys in the warm tones. So you do kind of get them based on color. So it's a matter of picking out which ones you like. You could also get them individually, which is kind of nice. That way, if you're looking for a specific color, you don't have to buy the whole set in order to get what you're looking for. And then wax pastels, these water-soluble ones, usually come in big trays like this, so you get a lot of the colors. But you can get them in small and larger packs too. So, all right, I'm going to go play, and I'll set some music to it, and you guys can just kind of watch and see what's going on, and then I'll check back in at the end with sort of the findings of what came out of here. All right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we're seeing here. So, the wax pastels, as you can see, they're nice and creamy, and they make some good saturation in terms of when you first draw on the page. Spreading it is a little tougher, or I'm sorry, actually works really well. They pull nicely. Spreading it with the water, as you can see, it starts to look more like watercolor as opposed to keeping that huge saturation. So great if you want that look. If you are hoping to continue holding on to that saturation as you pull it, these ones are not the best for that purpose, but they are really great for creaminess. They are great for pulling, that sort of thing. The gelatos. So gelatos actually are super pigmented. They stay really vibrant. They pull pretty well. They are really, these two are probably like the creamiest things. Like, they are super soft, and you can even just tell when you just draw a line. It's just like butter, if you will. And I'll do the same with this one. So these just kind of are super saturated. They're super smooth and pretty dreamy with their creaminess. I will say Marabu art crayons spread easier on a gessoed surface or a surface that has been prepped that's not porous. So this is just a piece of like watercolor mixed media paper. And the gelatos spread awesome on anything. So even on this paper that hasn't been treated, it spreads beautifully. So just even with your finger, you can start to soften those edges. Whereas the Marabu art crayons, softening the edges is tough unless you're using water. So when I pull with water, the gelatos pull pretty good, just depending on the color and the pigment. So the highly pigmented ones really hold on to the pigment very good. Those brighter or lighter colors tend to bleed out more, so you actually get a more dispersed color. The Marabu art crayons, these three stayed super pigmented as I pulled with water. These two decently so, but again, like comparing this pink to this pink, this is a much brighter pink. If anything, these maybe are more similar. So some of what you're seeing just also has to do with the actual tone and color of that specific product. However, I think this one definitely keeps a lot of pigment as you pull with water. Less like watercolor, more like a paint holding on to it. So then you saw me go through and do all that. And then the next thing I did was I heat set it and came back and went over it. Because I don't have like a heat gun tool, I just use my hair dryer. I went through and did it once, and then I tried pulling, and you could see that all of them pulled some color. But then I went through again and heat set again, and then this one stopped pulling. As I was pulling out this way, there's a lot less pigment coming out. The other thing about it is, even if it's not totally set just yet, the other thing is it maintains its shape really well. Like if I push on the edges with that water, whereas this one, even though it didn't create a huge blob of color, it did change my edges, so it does move it around. Whereas this one might pull a little bit if you haven't heat set it totally. It still maintains the shape if that's what you're going for. And then, like I said, this one definitely pulled out more. It does act more like watercolor in that sense. I then came to the bottom and did some blending just to see how they worked in terms of blending. Obviously, I didn't measure out that I was doing the same amounts of blues and reds. So, again, you get different tones of it. But I think they all blend really, really well. I personally think I like this saturation better, whereas this one I can see some of the places where the water stops. Another thing is that once they are set, if you come through and just drop water on it, usually that's another time where you can see some differences. So if I just let water sit on it a little bit, these are more likely to pull once I wipe it. Again, this is a non-treated surface, so very porous, everything kind of moves. if you are doing mixed media and you put this down on top of a gessoed board or a canvas, or if you've laid papers and put your gel matte medium over it, they're going to act a little bit differently in terms of spreadability. Like I said, the Marabu Art Crayons moves really creamy on any kind of surface like that. On a piece of paper, it does maintain a little bit of its original format when you're just using your fingers. Using water, different story. So let's see if any of this comes up. Okay, so hopefully you got something out of that. Really why I wanted to do this is I know a lot of times you see a project that somebody's doing, or they list things that they've used in their project, and you wonder if you can sub something in, and or you wonder why did they choose that specific thing. So you hear art crayons, maybe the Neocolor 2 art crayons, or the Marabu art crayons, or Gelatos, and you wonder, like, is that the same thing as if I have wax pastels that are water soluble? And obviously you can tell they're not totally the same, but they're not so far different that you can't use one and sub of the other. So my advice is go grab a couple of each, you know, like go grab a small pack of some water soluble pastels, go grab a small pack of Gelatos, or even just a single of like an art crayon or something. Grab colors that you use in your projects, because then you're more likely to experiment with them. If I just only bought orange, I probably wouldn't be as like versed in what it can do, because I really don't use a ton of orange in my work. So I tend to always grab teal or blues if I'm trying to see, like, test out a product. Like I got liquid acrylic the other day and I bought teal because I wanted to see what it would do, and I knew I'd use a teal. So grab a couple of each and play with them if you want. Otherwise, get one or get a set of one or the other, whichever one kind of stands out to you as something you might like to try and work with, and give it a go for a while. And then after a little while, maybe grab a different brand or a different style of supply, and you will start to see which one you lean towards, which one you like, how it works for what you do. And like I said, each of these has a different purpose for me, and I do use them pretty evenly, I would say, just depending on the project. So that's that, and I hope you got something out of it, or at least gained a little knowledge of what that might be. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a project using some of these, and I'm going to use my Oddball Art stamp. It's a digital download stamp. So what that means is you can resize it, you can use it over and over again. It's nice because if you were to want small feathers or large feathers, or if you wanted to print them on a book page or onto patterned paper, you can do all that and then play with it on your artwork. So it's nice because not only do you get lifetime use that you can keep reusing, keep printing it out and getting more out of it, is the thing about it that's better than rubber stamps is that you can resize and make it fit what you're doing. So I'm going to use these three guys today, and I'm going to get going, and you can kind of watch a little bit of the process, and then I'll snap pictures as I go, and then you'll see the final product. But I'm going to get started doing a background here with my art crayons and Gelatos and all that. So hopefully you can start to see how it all works in process.